Hello, this is Dr. Stephen Greer. I was raised in a tradition where I was taught that, we have a physical dimension. You're born, you live, you die. That's the end of it. And, of course, when I was 17, I had a near-death experience and actually went into this state of higher consciousness and unity consciousness, profound experience, where I realized that, what I was really told isn't true, and there is, in fact, this vast cosmos that's folded within the conscious structure of every one of us, and it was really clear. Now, of course, at age 17, I didn't have a foundation for understanding it intellectually, but I had a foundation and experience at that point that was amazing, and that sort of was my introduction to it. It's interesting, though, because about a couple years before that, I started experimenting with just techniques of meditation I invented on my own, where I would be lying out in a meadow outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, where I grew up, and I would bicycle out to the country because I loved wilderness and I loved nature. And I would do these meditation techniques that I just sort of visualized on my own, and I would have these out-of-body experiences where I would float over the city and would see things. And I began to do this kind of traveling and remote viewing even before my near-death experience, and it was really crystal clear. And I began to really question what I had been taught. Some people were raised in religious traditions that are very rigid. I was raised in a scientific tradition that was equally rigid, and so it was interesting that the path that I took was one that where I discovered this very much on my own from some inner spiritual knowledge that was latent. And what's exciting about it is that that's why, as I begun to teach the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind protocols to people, many people say, oh, well, I wasn't raised in a family that did this, and I don't have any. I said, yeah, but I wasn't either. And what I point out to everyone is that if you're conscious, you can be aware of awareness. And if you can become aware of pure, quiet mind in a deep, deep state, you can then escape the boundaries of linear 3D space and 4D space-time and see distant places and travel to other star systems and see other dimensions and learn knowledge from the level of Ritambara Pragya, which is the Sanskrit term, the Vedic term for this level of consciousness where all knowledge is contained. And this is such an exciting a bit of information for people, because most people think that you have to lay around on a bed of nails, for like 40 years, and then come out of a cave as a grizzled old man before you. I said, no. I mean, this is something that is the birthright of every single person on the planet, and importantly, all about our subject of ETs and other dimensions, of all the interstellar civilizations, that every sentient being in the cosmos has what's common with us is the universality of mind and consciousness. And when you realize that that is the foundation, it really is the spiritual foundation for everything we're doing with the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind initiative to make contact, is that it's the realization that the light of consciousness, the mind itself, is a singularity, as Erwin Schrödinger, the father of modern quantum physics, said, and that the conscious mind itself is transcendental and transpersonal, and is a singularity, that the mind whereby every single person is awake is, in fact, one. And there's never separation. And the native peoples really understand this concept of, shall we use the term, divine unity or profound oneness so well. And one of the things I remember reading many years ago is the native peoples in in South America and North America were kind of appalled at Western civilization was the concept of separateness, and that we're so separate and everything is separated, when in reality we never are. And in many of these more ancient cultures, that was just a way of living, like the dream time of the Aboriginals of Australia, where it was just part of their life that they would go into the dream state and they would converse with people in remote locations, and they would have precognition during the dream, and this was just part of the culture. It was part of their reality and was experienced in a very common way, not just by, shamans and what have you, but by everyone. And I think that this is what's exciting. I think in the coming era that we're entering into, this is going to be the central science, and the central area of study is the study of consciousness and higher states of consciousness. Even on the level of, if you look at Rupert Sheldrake's work in morphogenic fields, that as people begin to do something, whatever it is, a skill that's learned, it's the 100th monkey effect, that non-locally in remote places, people who have no connection to those to that person in terms of a linear connection will begin to have the same ideas or to have a similar pattern of thought or behavior. And this has been studied also with large groups of people meditating and praying, where it has an effect on an entire population of people. And so it's not as if our own internal existence is separate from the external. This duality is actually Maya. That's the illusion. The reality is that the entirety of the cosmos and the entire universe, even the external universe, is folded within this architecture and structure of the conscious mind that is within every individual. And that means that every individual is a conscious quantum hologram. So if you understand what a hologram is, if you take a hologram of, say, Marilyn Monroe with her skirt blowing up. I mean, it's just a graphic image. Everyone knows what it is. And if you were to take a little teeny part of that hologram, say the edge of her skirt, you would be able to go in it and you would have the entirety of Marilyn Monroe, that whole image, and it's within. Well, the whole universe is a conscious quantum hologram, and each individual that is a conscious being, which is all of us, has the entirety of the cosmos folded within us. And that's why when individuals go into deep meditation to make peaceful contact with these other civilizations from other star systems, it has an enormous effect way beyond what people can realize. And for people who are hearing this for the first time, well, on our website there's a link to a contact app that you can put on your iPhone or smartphone. And we now have thousands of people who are doing this, and there's a meditation in there. All the protocols are in this app. It will turn your phone into a magnetometer that will pick up the changes in the magnetic field as other life forms or ET craft approach. It is an amazing app, actually, and it's there. And what we're finding is that people who will take this app and just use it, I mean, people who are just, everyday, ordinary people all over the world, we're getting these reports of amazing contact they're having. Why? Because the universality of consciousness is that it's universal, and the mind that is within each of us is a singularity. And when you practice these deep meditation protocols and then intend to make peaceful contact, there is a hunger, an eagerness by these interstellar civilizations that have been around since the beginning of time, who have been around, some of them, I call them the guardians of life on Earth, who have been around watching and seeing the Earth develop and protecting the Earth. They are so eager for humans to awaken to that capability that is why they will appear. And, of course, some people have experiences with purely spiritual beings that aren't 3D physical, but I'm now referring to extraterrestrial civilizations that have physical worlds, physical bodies, and physical spacecraft. But in order to travel through interstellar distances, they use technologies and consciousness to drop out of 3D and to go through other dimensions, much like a lucid flying dream. And this is why so many people have experiences in the meditative and sleep state with ETs. And if you learn how to do the meditation and do the remote viewing, it will open that up because interstellar civilizations, the ones that have developed even a few thousand years past where we are, they routinely have that capability that interfaces not just with their consciousness but also with their technologies. And I've called this consciousness-assisted technology, but they also have technology-assisted consciousness, where a technological system assists in the consciousness and the projection of consciousness, or even the so-called astral body of light, which is, if you go to our website, you'll see a picture on the CE 5 part of SeriousDisclosure.com, you'll see a picture of this being floating in the desert outside our circle in Joshua Tree a couple years ago. And his name is Bijou, and he's from Andromeda Galaxy. And it's an amazing photograph. And it was first seen as an orb. It was about the size of a grapefruit, a sphere, floating in the desert during one of our breaks. And then I was down in the desert away from the group with just maybe 5 or 10 people, and then I came and saw this, and several people saw it, and it floated beside my right shoulder for just a short distance and vanished. And then I went back to the whole group, and I said, oh, God, we have to get back together. But everybody was talking, and it was at a break where people were getting, something to drink and eat. And one of our team members, Raven, then heard, along with myself and several other people, a whole little group of extraterrestrial biological life forms talking. I mean, literally you could hear them like da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And most people heard females, but I heard also a male voice in there. And I said, no, there's 4 of them, and one of them's a male. And so Raven connected with her mind, her consciousness, and asked permission to take their photograph, even though they were dematerialized, but you could hear them talking. Now, this gets into the whole question of transdimensional science and how ETs can appear, disappear, appear partially in this dimension, partially not. It's a fascinating area of study, which is really what the main focus that I'm trying to bring to people is, so they understand there's a whole science to this, but there's an experiential level of it, and that you really have to master to understand what's going on when you make contact. But at that moment, she just asked permission and took a photograph, and I think she had it set so the lens was open 3 or 4 seconds. And in the frame was this male that was floating just outside where our chairs were, and turned and waved at her and smiled. And it's this amazing, enigmatic, it almost looks like a hologram, but it's not. It's actually the etheric and astral energy being electronically teleported out of that orb. And you can see the orb is to the left, over by a bush that lights up a bush, and there's a cone of light that lights up the chairs, and he's sort of being held in this energy field. And this is in the photograph. And what I point out to people is that they can be around us, and the only thing we saw with our physical eyes was the sphere. But within the sphere of light was the entire spacecraft and all its occupants. This is the key point. But all that could be seen in this dimension, as it sort of folded in, was this grapefruit-sized sphere. And then we heard the sound of, many people heard the sound of these beings talking. And then she took the photograph. So this kind of contact experience is astonishing. Now, a lot of people say, well, why don't they just fully materialize? Well, they have done that, and of course, so it'd be very brief, and then usually within 1 or 2 minutes, there's a jet fighter that comes in over us. Actually, 2 years ago, when we were in England, we're getting ready to go to the crop circles in a couple weeks. We were up on this hill in England, and we had one of these massive spheres appear, and everyone saw it. And within moments, there was a helicopter with no lights on, and I mean completely blackened, which is against the law in any country. It had no navigation lights, no lights. But that came over us less than 100 feet, 50 to 100 feet over us, and did this several times because it had picked up. So what I tell people is that the actual ET civilizations are very eager to make contact, but it may happen enigmatically and in ways that you don't expect. People look at a lot of science fiction movies, and they need to realize that the real ET phenomenon is something much more nuanced and amazing, actually, and conscious, and that it's not happening within the vacuum of a world that's completely healed. It's happening within the reality of Earth, which is, of course, a very heavily armed camp. So all that has to get factored into it. But the key to having a successful, deeply spiritual contact experience, in however way it manifests, is understanding the nature and the true spiritual nature of the mind and conscious being within all of us. And when a group does it, it becomes very powerful because the studies that have been done in consciousness studies is that when you have, say, one person intending with their awareness to affect a random number generator or something, it has a certain effect. But if you have two people who love each other, where there's a heart connection like you're talking about, Hillary, the effect is actually exponentially greater, not just arithmetically greater. And so there's this effect that is beyond space-time linearity that's very powerful when more than one person is doing this with a pure heart in a peaceful way with the right ethical intentions, and it has an amazing effect. Most people don't understand that whatever you may hear about on CNN that, say, the NSA has or the intelligence community has is usually between 20 and 50 years older than what's actually operating in what are called unacknowledged special access projects, which we go into in the film Sirius. And those of you, by the way, who don't have it, you can now, it's in stock. You can get it in both NTSC and PAL. You can order it at SiriusDisclosure.com. But I think you can also see it online on video on demand there. But I think that most people don't understand, for example, that in 1974, a man that I knew personally who's since passed away, he had an electronics company, and he had invented very high-end electronics that would pick up what he called neutrino light, but very subtle light, almost on the level of the astral. And the National Reconnaissance Office, the NRO, Google it, it's the super secret spy agency that runs all the classified satellites, seized the technology. He told me this personally, and I have a witness to this, by the way. They seized the technology, and this is 40 years ago, and put it on their satellite so that they could pick up ET craft even when they weren't in this dimension but were about to materialize so that they could lock onto them. So that was, now you can imagine how many iterations of technological evolution have happened since 1974. It's almost 40 years in a classified project that has, as Donald Rumsfeld said, $2.3 trillion that is unaccounted for in the Department of Defense alone, not to mention the intelligence community, that have gone into these so-called black projects. So what I always tell people, whatever you think the capabilities are within classified human projects, it's 1,000 times more developed. However, one of the things that they cannot do anything about is people coming together openly, doing disclosure, and also making contact and consciousness. Because, yes, I'm one person that can be a high-value target. I hate to use that term. But, you know, there are 7 billion people on the planet, and now there are thousands of teams out there doing the CE5 contact protocols, and many more thousands of people who are just by themselves doing it. That they can't handle. And so one of the things I tell people is that even from that point of view, looking at morphogenic field analysis from Rupert Sheldrake and others, looking at non-local consciousness, looking at how change happens, whether it was the civil rights era, whether it was the women's suffrage movement, whether it was the emergence of democracies around the world, whether it was the Arab Spring, whether it was a Stonewall and the evolution of rights for gay and lesbian people, whether it all is about people coming together, making that change happen. Well, the big change that we have to make happen is the evolution of our planet from a world of division to a world of peace and oneness, where we join then and link up to all these other civilizations that are out there in the cosmos. And my understanding is that in the next few hundred years, the Earth and humanity is going to be completely integrated and will become in a state of universal oneness with all these other civilizations, but openly. And that has to start somewhere. It doesn't happen instantly, but it has to start somewhere. And so that's what's really happening with the CE5 initiative and with what we're doing with disclosure and contact. And the foundation of it, however, is not only the operational paradigm is the understanding and practice of mindfulness and consciousness and pure-heartedness and intent. But the philosophical underpinning is also that, because once you understand that, I mean, look how different someone from China is from an Italian, or, someone in the Congo may be from a Norwegian. Well, now multiply that a millionfold in diversity throughout the cosmos. But what is common amongst all these intelligences? It's the capacity to be sentient, to be awake, to be conscious, to be a spiritual being. That is universal. And that's why I keep coming back to this very concept of the oneness of mind and this unbounded absolute field of pure consciousness. That is the root foundation of not only operationally being able to make contact in remote view in terms of practice, but in terms of understanding other cultures, because then the multiplicity is there. It's not like multiplicity and diversity is going to go away. It's wonderful, but it's not something that becomes a point of conflict. It becomes a point of celebration because you see the commonality. There's this oneness that is a thread, a golden thread that weaves all life together, and that is the state of mind, of spirituality, of this pure state of consciousness that is really oneness, and the highest expression of love is oneness, because if you love someone, you want to be one with them. You want to be with them. So there are all these deep meanings to what we're doing in contact that then expresses itself into what we're doing socially, culturally, and otherwise, and technologically. One of the interesting points that I'm going to be making to this group of world leaders that I'm meeting with is going to be the technologies that we have today to provide the deep energy that we run on are all explosive, violent technologies. Burning coal, burning oil. Look at the town in Quebec that's been immolated, just burned up by those petroleum cars crashing into it the other night in Quebec. It's and even nuclear power is very destructive. So the consciousness of the Kali Yuga, of division and separation, is manifested even through our technology, whereas the technologies that are based on zero-point energy and quantum vacuum is this state of oneness, and it's nonviolent. It's like nonviolent change in the civil rights era. It's nonviolent energy generation so that you're not destroying the atmosphere, you're not destroying the rivers and the land in order to generate energy. And, of course, these technologies began to be discovered back in the 1800s and early 1900s. They just have been ruthlessly suppressed because of big money power issues. But it is an expression of our consciousness that we still have oil and gas and coal and nuclear power. And so in reality, yes, it's a technological and it's a physical thing, but it's an outward expression of our state collectively on a spiritual level. And many people aren't comfortable when they hear that because nobody wants to really own that collectively, but it's just the truth. And as soon as we awaken, we can decide, we can support a project to bring out the kinds of technologies that have been around that have been confiscated by a very small number of people who have abused their power. But if enough people get behind the idea that we can change that, it will change. Now, it may not be instant, but it will happen. But we have to intend it. But we have to intend it from a place of a higher consciousness. I tell people you're basically in a 24-hour training program because even at night I encourage people to keep a dream journal and to intend to be awake within the dream and to learn and to see. And it does carry over. Some of the most amazing experiences that the group will be in the lucid dream state. And it's something that most people say, I go to sleep and it's just nothing there. But in reality, most cultures have acknowledged the profound nature of what can happen in the awake, lucid dream, and that you can actually become aware of things while you're in the dream and begin to travel and learn and explore even in that state, just like you can in the meditative state. So it becomes a seamless understanding that consciousness and your own conscious reality is plugged into this unbounded aspect of mind, and the exploration is infinite. And we basically limit ourselves. I tell people we put ourselves in our own cages and lock it. We have the key to unlock it, and we have to intend to do it. Anything someone like you and I can do is sort of point the way, but ultimately every individual has the key to unlocking the freedom within their own soul. And that's what everyone has to accept responsibility for, and then come together. This is where that individual becomes the social and cultural, to make the change real in the material world, where the physical world is benefited from that realization, and where you get the courage, spiritual courage, to make the change happen in a nonviolent way, but in a way that is spiritually the Shambhala warrior sort of way, where you're not a warrior in the violent sense, but you're not going to be intimidated by people who want to drag the world back into a period of division, separation, and warfare. And I think going forward, this is one of the biggest challenges we're going to have, because it's very, very easy to play on people's fears and hatreds. And this is, of course, demagogues have always done that in organized religion and political systems. And the big risk of the coming decade or so is, as people become more and more aware that there's intelligent life out there, that we not take, one racial or tribal or national competition and division, or all the different things that have divided humanity over the thousands of years of this era of division and separation, that we not then extrapolate that into this new era of enlightenment, where we then say, oh, well, now we have to view these other civilizations in an us versus them way, because this is not progress to go from international war and intertribal war and interspecies to then go to interplanetary war. It's very easy to play on that proclivity within the human cultural social construct, because that's been the collective experience for so long in our society of, one tribe or one religion or one nationality or one economic philosophy competing with another, and to the point of it being violent warfare. And so there are people who, of course, would benefit from that kind of conflict being expanded into space. And they are very good at manipulating that scenario. And what we have to do is say there's another path, when we have to choose the path of universal peace. And that is something, it is a conscious choice we have to make.